how accurate is it when people say all of the olive oil in grocery stores is like garbage?
I don't know.
Like,
But
sorry, that's way too general of a question.
No. Yeah,
but
but I absolutely believe that a lot of olive oil in grocery stores is crap.
I guess better question: how do you decide what a good one is?
I mean, there's literally like, I mean, there's a brand that I use and I trust and I love it. And disclosure, I'm also now an investor in the company. I've been buying it for so long.
And it's Brian Johnson's Blueprint Olive Oil. No, I'm just kidding.
It's the company's called Costarina.
Okay.
And I mean, I think you just have to kind of look at their process. Like, where do these olives come from? How are they pressed? And is anything else added to this?
Okay.
But yes, I have been duped. I probably did a post on this once on social, maybe 5 years ago, where I was so annoyed one day when I was like using this olive oil that said extra virgin olive oil. And then I looked at the back and it wasn't even extra virgin olive oil. Like, they had literally said extra virgin olive oil. And it was like, you know, half of it was like safflower oil or sunflower oil or some garbage in there. I mean, it's not a perfect rule of thumb, but really good olive oil has a peppery taste to it.
Now, absurd maybe question, but if I was to, you know, try and not switch the saturated fat to a monounsaturated olive oil that's high quality, rather I just cut saturated fat, would the caloric reduction outweigh the benefit of using a super healthy olive oil?
Yeah, great question. So I just saw a study that was published a couple of weeks ago that looked at this. Unfortunately, the study was so extreme in its caloric reduction that
it's hard to apples, that kind of thing.
No, it's not applicable, right? So these people were put on a 700 calorie a day diet for 8 weeks. And it was a ketogenic diet, so it was high saturated fat, but in absolute amounts, that's not a very high amount of saturated fat. So it was a high percent of total calories, but the total calories were something like 740 calories a day, something ridiculous like that. And it had a very favorable impact on lipids. Now, that wasn't even the purpose of the study. This was a study looking at hypocaloric KD plus hypocaloric fat restriction in patients with polycystic ovarian syndrome. So totally separate, but I was immediately drawn to kind of the lipid analysis. But unfortunately, because it was such a calorie deficit, I don't think you can draw a conclusion as to what was the cause there. But I believe it was just the total calorie restriction. Total calorie restriction probably played the dominant role there. But I'd love to see that. I mean, what I'd like to see is the isocaloric version of that. Right. And what I say to these patients is, look, like, you know, if a ketogenic diet is working really well for you, or whatever diet you're on is working really well for you, and it's producing a horrible lipid profile, you can stay on the diet and we can fix the lipid profile pharmacologically. Like, there aren't many things that pharmacotherapy works really well for. If you really stop to think about it, like, drugs work really well for antimicrobial purposes. Like, antibiotics are so life-saving. Like, many of us would be dead. You and I probably wouldn't be here if it weren't for antibiotics. Let's be realistic. Median life expectancy was 40 up until about 150 years ago.
That's crazy.
Right? Yeah. So like, amazing classes of drugs there. Are they overused? Absolutely. Are there downsides? Absolutely. But let's call a spade a spade. They save lives all day. Yeah. Antihypertensive therapy and anti-lipid therapy fit in the same bucket, in my view, which is these are life-saving drugs when used early enough and when used correctly. And we should take advantage and celebrate that victory of modern medicine. And we should use diet to correct the things that medicine is really crappy at correcting, like metabolic health. So eat the diet that is best for your energy balance, your metabolic health, your muscle mass. And if that happens to be a diet that makes your lipids go haywire, fix the lipids with the pharmacotherapy. The reverse is much harder. Right? I have patients that take the opposite approach. They're like, oh my God, you know, my ApoB is a little high. You know, they're on a standard diet and they say, is there anything I can do dietarily to crush my ApoB? And I'm like, absolutely. We could put you on a 0 fat diet. Like, we could put you on a 12% fat diet and we would take your ApoB down to 40. But the problem is, what else would we do to you? Like, maybe for some people that's a reasonable diet, but for most people it's actually not a good diet. So again, it's a very strong bias, but I really feel we should not be using diet as the tool to fix hyperbeta lipoproteinemia.
Okay. Understood. Yeah, it's sometimes I wonder because there's so many things that you feel like you have to take because you've been told this thing is protective or it's longevity enhancing or whatever. And it's like sometimes by the end of the day you're wondering, should I just have not ate the food? Would that have been better overall? And it's like I don't know.
Again, it depends. I think this is. It's hard. I mean, I love having these discussions with patients because I'm having the discussion with an individual and we can see all the data.
Yeah.
It's very hard to have these data in this discussion as a general topic, other than what I can just say, which is I really want patients to use nutrition as the primary tool that addresses energy balance.
All right.
That's a bold statement. What does it mean? It means you're not going to exercise your way into energy balance. Exercise matters, but it's not the main lever. The main lever is intake. Mm-hmm. So the diet that keeps you in energy balance is the best diet for you. And for many people, that is some form of dietary restriction. It's not hardcore calorie restriction. It's not hardcore time restricted feeding. It's some form of dietary restriction. Many people who go down the dietary restriction pathway ultimately find a diet that is incongruent with good lipids. Mm-hmm. And I think to take them off that diet onto a diet that's better for their lipids, but then disrupts energy balance is ridiculous. Like if you told me, would you rather be on lipid lowering therapy for life or on a GLP-1 agonist for life? Like it's no comparison in my mind, which of those two you'd rather do.